I'm going to show you one chart that explains why I believe we all should be buying physical gold and silver. Here it is. It's not a growth stock. It's not a commodity consistently rising in value. This is the United States money supply, known to the Federal Reserve as M2, sitting at $22 trillion and counting. This, and this alone, is the reason we have consistent inflation. This is the reason your dollars lose value each and every year. And this is the reason that gold and silver prices will continue to rise for decades into the future. You see, despite what many DC politicians would have you believe, there is only one thing that can cause inflation, and that is an increase to the money supply. And the only entity with the power to increase the money supply is, of course, the United States Federal Reserve. Now, don't get it twisted. It's nice they put the word federal in front, but the Federal Reserve is about as federal as Federal Express. It is a private entity, a banking cabal designed to siphon 10 to 20% of total GDP off the top through clever financial trickery. Now, up until 1913, the money supply was fairly consistent. There was no Federal Reserve, there was no money printing. But since these robber baron bankers got authority to print and manufacture federal debt, the value of the U.S. dollar has fallen by a staggering 97%. Inflation, which we all look to as normal, is anything but. It is an additional 2, 3, sometimes 7 or 8% tax on the working class. And most of this stems from a bloated federal government that for the last 20 plus years has been completely incapable of living within its means. Despite taxing us at 30 to 40%, taking roughly a third of our total labor, it continues to operate on such a massive, bloated, and wasteful scale that it needs to print trillions of additional dollars to fill the gaps. The government has spent more than it brought in each and every year for the last 20 years. Last week, the Congressional Budget Office released its official estimates for the 2025 deficit. And that number, despite DOGE, an entire government entity designed to cut waste, fraud, and abuse, despite hundreds of billions of dollars coming in new tariff revenue, and despite huge economic growth, still, in that backdrop, they found a way to spend $1.809 trillion more than it brought in. Folks, the writing is on the wall, and if you do not see it clearly, there's nothing I can do to help you. The government will never quit spending. They will never live within their means. And this creates a vicious cycle that has already spun out of control. Interest payments on our debt, simply paying the interest on money we've already spent, not even paying it down, has now exceeded $1 trillion per year. And as interest rates rise from 4 to 4.5% to 5 and 8 and 10, and what historically has been 14 and 15%, that number is going to balloon exponentially. But it's not even just interest rates. You see, every year we have a deficit. Every year the government spends more than it brings in. It increases their credit card balance, the national debt, which is $37 trillion and climbing. And as that balance increases, so does the amount of interest they owe on it. And so what happens is they continue to spend more than they bring in. The debt continues to balloon. The interest on that debt balloons. That rising interest payment further widens the deficit, the gap between income in and spending. That further increases the debt, further increases the interest, and this thing just spirals out of control. We're way past the point of no return. And it doesn't matter who you elect. This is not a Democrat issue. It's not a Republican issue. No matter who you put in office, the bombs keep dropping and the debt keeps rising. Now, we can argue whether the federal government will eventually default on this debt or whether they will simply try to print their way out of it as they've done for the last 2 decades, which is likely what's going to happen. That, of course, will only further increase the money supply, further drive up inflation, which is going to cause the price of goods and services to rise, which is going to devalue the dollar, which, of course, then will also continue to raise the price of precious metals like gold and silver. You see, gold and silver are the only real money. These are stores of value that have served as currency for thousands of years. Fiat currencies, on the other hand, have a 0% success rate. Every single one since the beginning of time has eventually failed, and the U.S. dollar will be no different. Now, I'm not a doom and gloomer. I'm not on here trying to drive clicks. I'm simply following the math to the only logical conclusion that is there, which is this. Inflation, which currently sits at around 3%, is probably about as good as it's ever going to get. We will see 7 and 8% inflation again. I believe we'll see double-digit inflation inside of my lifetime. I think we'll see gold prices, not just at $4,000 or $5,000 an ounce, at $40,000 and $50,000 an ounce. Not next year, not in 18 months, but 10, 20 years, absolutely. The average new car will cost $200,000, $300,000. The average new home will be $2 to $3 million. Just follow the logic. Follow the assumed inflation rate of 2 or 3%, and you get there. But when inflation goes parabolic, which it has no option but to do, you hit those targets a lot sooner. Now, gold prices came down. Oh no, gold's down 5%. Panic, sell in the streets. Listen, if you're trying to swing trade gold over a couple of weeks or a couple of months, sure, I get it. Try to time your injuries. But if you're trying to protect and grow your wealth, if you're trying to actually hold on to money that cannot be deflated by the Federal Reserve and the U.S. government's bloated spending, then the current day or week's quote for an ounce of gold, an ounce of silver is fairly irrelevant. If this trajectory continues, which I don't see how it's possible it doesn't, and if this plays out as the math says it will, gold should see $8,000 to $10,000 per ounce over the next 2 to 3 years. And silver should be between $100 and $200 an ounce. Now, this is my prediction. Obviously, anything can happen. Feel free to fight me about this in the comments. But I'm betting a lot of money that this is going to be the case. And as someone who has studied the history of the markets and money, fiat currencies, governments, I see no other way this plays out. Now, a lot of people are going to point to Bitcoin and say Bitcoin solves that problem. And yes, in theory, you are correct. And right now, we have a very pro-crypto administration. But when I look back over time, there has never been a government that allowed something else to compete with their control over the money supply. The reason Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies have been allowed to run, in my opinion, is that they are not used as money right now. Even the biggest Bitcoin bull out there does not buy anything in Bitcoin. And the government is still taxing the growth, the gains you make on this digital asset. But as soon as Bitcoin became a true and widely accepted form of currency, as soon as you could pay your plumber or get your salary in Bitcoin that could not be traced, tracked, and taxed, the government would ban it overnight. Bitcoin would fall from 100,000 to 1,000 in an hour. And that, at least to me, is not a risk I'm willing to take. Plus, Bitcoin fails in all the panic measures. If the internet is down, if the power is out, you have no money. Gold, however, is a physical store of value and has been one for thousands of years. So I will remain bullish on gold, silver, and other precious metals from now to the future. While it may get a little overvalued or a little undervalued along the way, the long-term trend in precious metals prices will continue to go up, and by my estimation, parabolically so. And while I will refrain from giving you any tailored specific investment advice, I believe it wise for every investor to have at least some exposure to gold and silver. Now, if you want to learn more about what's happening and discover ways to grow and protect your wealth, I encourage you to subscribe to this channel. Put out content each and every day, stock picks, strategies, anything I believe can benefit you financially.